The silence in the attic was thick with dust and the ghosts of forgotten memories. For Sarah, sorting through her late husband Daniel's belongings was a task she'd been putting off for 6 months. 6 months since the heart attack that had stolen him away, leaving her adrift in a sea of grief and unanswered questions. Daniel had been a good man, a loving husband, or so she had believed for the 28 years they'd shared. Their life in the quiet suburban home in Ohio had been comfortable, predictable even, filled with the gentle rhythm of 2 lives intertwined. They had their routines, their shared history etched into the worn furniture and framed photographs that adorned their walls. There were no grand adventures, no scandalous secrets, or so Sarah thought, until she found the journal. It was tucked away in a dusty box filled with old tax returns and college diplomas, a simple leather-bound book that looked out of place amongst the mundane documents of their life. Her fingers traced the worn cover, a familiar scent of old paper and leather rising to meet her. Daniel had always been a meticulous record-keeper for practical matters. But a personal journal? This was something new, something unexpected. With a hesitant breath, Sarah opened the first page. The handwriting was undeniably his, a familiar scrawl that brought a fresh wave of sorrow. The initial entries were innocuous, filled with daily observations about work, the weather, and the occasional note about their dinner plans. Sarah found a bittersweet comfort in these familiar words, a fleeting sense of connection with the man she had lost. But as she turned the pages, the tone began to shift. The entries became less frequent, more introspective, tinged with a melancholy she hadn't recognized in the vibrant man she knew. Then came the entry that stopped her breath, a single sentence that shattered the foundation of her world. Met her again today. It's getting harder to keep this from Sarah. Her heart pounded in her chest, a cold dread creeping into her veins. Her? Who was her? Sarah scanned the preceding pages, searching for any clue, any hint of another woman in Daniel's life. There was nothing. It was as if this other person had materialized out of thin air, a phantom in their otherwise solid existence. Driven by a mixture of fear and a desperate need to understand, Sarah continued reading. The subsequent entries were cryptic, filled with coded language and veiled references. There were mentions of secret meetings, stolen moments, and a love that was described with a passion Sarah hadn't seen directed at her in years. The more she read, the more a horrifying picture began to form in her mind. Could Daniel have been leading a double life? Could the man she loved, the man she thought she knew inside and out, have been harboring such a profound deception? Days turned into sleepless nights as Sarah delved deeper into the journal. It was like peeling back the layers of an onion, each revelation bringing fresh pain and confusion. She discovered that her name was Eleanor, a woman Daniel had apparently met during a business trip years ago. Their initial encounter seemed innocent enough, a chance meeting at a conference. But the journal entries revealed a connection that quickly blossomed into a passionate affair, one that Daniel had desperately tried to conceal. He wrote of the guilt that gnawed at him, the constant fear of his secret being exposed, but also of the undeniable pull he felt towards Eleanor. Then came the most devastating revelation of all. An entry, dated nearly 15 years ago, read, "Eleanor told me today, we're going to have a child. My child." The words swam before Sarah's eyes, the reality of their meaning crashing down upon her with brutal force. A child? Daniel had another child, a secret family that she had never known existed. The journal contained further entries detailing Eleanor's pregnancy, the birth of their daughter, a little girl named Emily. There were even a few faded photographs tucked within the pages, a blurry image of Daniel holding a baby, another of a young girl with his unmistakable eyes. Sarah's world tilted on its axis. 28 years. 28 years of marriage, of shared dreams and quiet companionship, now felt like a carefully constructed lie. How could he have kept such a monumental secret from her? Had their entire life together been a facade? The pain was unbearable, a crushing weight on her chest that made it hard to breathe. But amidst the pain, a fierce determination began to ignite within her. She needed to know more. She needed to understand the extent of Daniel's deception, the lives he had led in secret. The journal was her only guide, a roadmap to a hidden past that she was now compelled to explore. Who was Eleanor? Where were she and Emily now? Did anyone else know about this secret family? The questions swirled in Sarah's mind, a relentless storm of confusion and betrayal. She looked around their familiar home, a place that now felt alien and tainted. Every photograph, every shared memory was now viewed through a different lens, colored by the shocking revelations in Daniel's journal. The man she had loved was a stranger, a man who had built a second life alongside the one they shared. Sarah knew one thing for certain. Her life would never be the same again. The comfortable predictability she had once cherished was gone, replaced by a burning need to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Her journey had just begun, a descent into the hidden depths of her husband's secret life. The journal became Sarah's shadow, her constant companion as she navigated the treacherous landscape of Daniel's hidden life. Each entry was a new shard of glass, cutting deeper into her perception of the man she had loved. She found herself obsessively rereading passages, searching for clues, for contradictions, for anything that might explain the monumental deceit. The initial shock slowly began to give way to a cold, analytical determination. She needed facts, not just the raw emotion that threatened to consume her. One particular entry caught her eye, a detail she had initially overlooked in her haze of despair. Daniel had meticulously recorded not just Eleanor's name and Emily's birth date, but also specific locations. A small coffee shop in downtown Columbus, mentioned frequently as their meeting spot. An apartment complex address also in Columbus where Eleanor and Emily lived. These weren't vague, romanticized musings. They were tangible addresses, threads leading directly to the heart of his secret. A chilling thought solidified in Sarah's mind. She had to see them. She had to put faces to the names that had so brutally reshaped her reality. The drive to Columbus felt surreal. It was a journey she'd made countless times with Daniel for weekend getaways or shopping trips. But this time, it was different. The familiar landmarks whizzed by, but Sarah saw them through a veil of suspicion and hurt. She clutched the journal tightly on the passenger seat, its leather cover a constant reminder of the mission she was on. Parking a few blocks away from the apartment complex, her heart hammered against her ribs. Fear mingled with a fierce, almost desperate curiosity. What if Eleanor was waiting for her, armed with her own version of the truth? What if Emily was a carbon copy of Daniel, a painful echo of what could have been? She found the building easily, a modern brick structure with a small, well-maintained courtyard. Standing across the street, hidden behind a large oak tree, Sarah watched. Hours passed. People came and went, but no one matched the blurry images from the journal. Just as despair began to set in, a woman emerged from the building, pushing a grocery cart. She was of average height, with warm brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and a smile that seemed gentle and unassuming. Eleanor. Sarah knew it instinctively. The woman's face wasn't extraordinary, but there was an undeniable familiarity, a subtle echo of Daniel's own soft features in her profile. Then, a few steps behind her, a young girl skipped out, swinging a colorful backpack. Emily. Sarah's breath hitched. The girl had Daniel's eyes, the same piercing blue, the same slight crinkle at the corners when she smiled. A wave of nausea washed over Sarah, mixed with an unexpected pang of pity. This wasn't a villain. This was a family Daniel had created and carefully concealed. Sarah retreated, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The raw anger was still there, a burning ember of betrayal, but it was now laced with a profound sadness. Eleanor seemed like a kind woman, oblivious to the other life Daniel had led, just as Sarah had been oblivious to hers. And Emily was an innocent child, a victim of her father's web of lies. This was far more complicated than simple infidelity. This was an entire parallel existence, meticulously crafted and maintained. The journal continued to offer insights, though now Sarah read it with a different lens. Daniel's entries grew increasingly conflicted. He wrote about the immense pressure of balancing two lives, the constant fear of discovery, and the toll it was taking on his mental health. He confessed to loving both women, in different ways, a sentiment that sent a fresh wave of disgust through Sarah. How could he claim to love her, truly love her, while building a complete family with someone else? Yet, his torment seemed genuine, his words filled with a desperate longing for a resolution he could never achieve. He even mentioned specific financial arrangements, detailing how he discreetly supported Eleanor and Emily, funneling money through a shell company he'd set up years ago. This detail, more than anything, confirmed the calculated nature of his deception. Then came the entries about his deteriorating health. Daniel began to complain of chest pains, fatigue, and a pervasive sense of dread. He attributed it to stress, the constant tightrope walk between his two lives. Sarah remembered those months, how Daniel had seemed unusually withdrawn, often complaining of exhaustion, attributing it to work pressure. She had offered support, comfort, never suspecting the true source of his anguish. The irony was bitter. His secret life had literally killed him. A new, unsettling question began to surface. Did anyone else know? Daniel was meticulous, but was he perfect? Sarah started replaying conversations, observing the behavior of Daniel's closest friends and colleagues. There was Mark, Daniel's lifelong best friend, who often seemed to avoid eye contact when Daniel's trips to Columbus were mentioned, and Mrs. Henderson, their elderly neighbor, who occasionally made odd, cryptic remarks about Daniel's busy schedule and how he always seemed to be running somewhere. These fleeting observations, once dismissed as harmless quirks, now seemed laden with hidden meaning. The journal hinted at one person who might have known: Daniel's estranged brother, Richard. Richard and Daniel had a tumultuous relationship, rarely speaking, but the journal contained a brief, agitated entry about a tense conversation with Richard, where Daniel felt exposed. Could Richard have been privy to Daniel's secret? This possibility added another layer of complexity. Richard was a volatile, unpredictable man, someone Sarah had always avoided. The thought of approaching him filled her with trepidation, yet the burning need for answers pushed her forward. The comfortable life she had built was gone, replaced by a tangled web of secrets, and she was determined to unravel every last thread, even if it meant confronting the most painful truths. The deeper she delved, the more the lines between victim and investigator blurred, pulling her further into the labyrinth of Daniel's lies. The journey to Richard's dilapidated farmhouse, nestled deep in the rural outskirts of Kentucky, felt like stepping into another dimension. The neatly manicured lawns of Sarah's Ohio suburb were replaced by overgrown fields and rusted machinery. Richard was Daniel's older brother by a decade, a man who had always been a shadow, a distant, troubled presence in Daniel's carefully curated life. Daniel rarely spoke of him, and when he did, it was with a weariness that suggested a long, unresolved history. Now Sarah understood why. The journal entries concerning Richard were few, but chilling. They hinted at a volatile past, financial improprieties, and a deep-seated resentment that festered between the brothers. As Sarah pulled her car up the gravel driveway, a gaunt figure emerged from the porch. Richard, his face, etched with lines of hardship and cynicism, was a harsher version of Daniel's, like a sketch that had been drawn with too much force. He squinted at her, a cigarette dangling from his lips. "Sarah?" His voice was raspy, laced with a surprise that quickly turned to suspicion. "What in God's name are you doing here?" Sarah clutched the journal to her chest, her knuckles white. She had rehearsed this moment countless times in her head, but now, faced with Richard's raw, uninviting presence, her courage wavered. I found something," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "Daniel's journal." Richard's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something unreadable, fear, recognition, passing through them. He gestured dismissively towards a rickety porch swing. "Come on up. Don't just stand there." The conversation began cautiously, each word a carefully placed minefield. Sarah explained about Daniel's passing, about finding the journal, about the devastating discovery of Eleanor and Emily. As she spoke, Richard listened, his face impassive, occasionally taking a drag from his cigarette. There was no shock, no feigned surprise, just a grim, knowing silence that unnerved Sarah even more. Finally, when she finished, a long silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the distant caw of a crow. Richard crushed his cigarette but under his boot. So he finally got caught, even in death, he muttered, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. Typical Daniel. Always playing the saint while living like a devil. His words struck Sarah like a physical blow. You knew, she accused, her voice trembling with anger. You knew about Eleanor. About Emily. Richard's gaze met hers, surprisingly steady. Knew? Sarah, I practically helped him hide it for years. Daniel was my brother, for better or worse. He came to me in a bind, desperate. Said he'd made a mistake, a big one. Eleanor was his secretary, much younger, infatuated. One thing led to another, and then, a baby. He was terrified of losing you, losing his perfect life. Sarah's head reeled. He said you two had a tense conversation that he felt exposed. A dark chuckle escaped Richard. Oh, that wasn't about Eleanor. Not directly. That was about the money. He started dipping into his investments, our family inheritance, to support Eleanor and the kid. He was bleeding money. I tried to warn him, told him it would all catch up to him. He was a fool. Thought he could manage everything. Everyone. Richard paused, then looked at her with a grim intensity. But there's more, Sarah. Something Daniel never put in that pretty little journal of his. Something he tried to bury even deeper. Sarah felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. What are you talking about? Richard leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper, his eyes glinting with a mix of resentment and something akin to twisted satisfaction. Eleanor wasn't just some innocent secretary, Sarah. She was a schemer, predator. She saw Daniel's weakness, his need for excitement outside his predictable life with you, and she exploited it. She deliberately got pregnant, and when Daniel panicked, she saw her chance. She blackmailed him subtly at first, then more overtly as Emily grew older. She demanded money, a lavish lifestyle, always threatening to expose him to you, to his work, to everyone. The revelation hit Sarah with the force of a physical blow, worse than anything she had read in the journal. Blackmail? Eleanor? The gentle woman she had observed from afar? It twisted her stomach, replacing the pity with a fresh wave of horror. No, that can't be true, she stammered, wanting desperately to disbelieve him. Oh, it's true. All right, Richard scoffed, lighting another cigarette. Daniel came to me distraught. He was trapped. He loved Emily fiercely, but he hated what Eleanor had become. He tried to cut her off once after Emily turned 5. She threatened to go public with everything, even threatened to take Emily away, disappear with her if he didn't comply. She was ruthless. Daniel was bleeding money, losing himself. He was afraid, Sarah. Terrified. This new layer of deception was sickening. It painted a different picture of Eleanor, transforming her from a naive second wife into a manipulative figure. And Daniel, he was no longer just a deceiver, but a victim in his own intricate web of lies. The overwhelming pity Sarah had felt for him began to morph into something more complex, a mixture of anger, sorrow, and a strange, grudging understanding. His guilt, his torment, his declining health, it all suddenly made a terrifying kind of sense. The double life wasn't just a choice. It was a prison. Richard continued, his voice devoid of emotion. Daniel was trying to find a way out to protect Emily. He started stashing money, planning to disappear with her, or at least set her up financially without Eleanor knowing. That's why he was so obsessed with those shell companies with discreet investments. He was trying to build a new escape route, for himself and for Emily, away from Eleanor's control. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. Daniel's heart attack. Could it have been triggered by the immense stress, the constant fear of exposure, and the desperate fight to save his daughter from Eleanor's grip? The pieces were beginning to fall into place, forming a picture far more tragic and sinister than she had ever imagined. Her husband wasn't just a man with a secret family. He was a man caught in a deadly trap, a victim of his own choices and Eleanor's ruthless ambition. The journal, once a source of bitter truth, now seemed like a cry for help, a desperate confession of a man drowning in his own carefully constructed lies. The confrontation with Richard had opened a Pandora's box, revealing a darkness that extended far beyond simple infidelity. Sarah knew she had to find Eleanor again, but this time, her purpose was completely different. The drive back to Columbus felt heavier, weighted by the new, horrifying truths Richard had laid bare. The image of Eleanor as a gentle, unsuspecting woman had shattered, replaced by the chilling portrait of a calculated manipulator. And Daniel, her husband, was no longer just a betrayer, but a man trapped, desperately trying to shield his daughter from the very woman who gave her life. Sarah's initial fury had cooled, replaced by a complex cocktail of sorrow, disbelief, and a strange, almost protective instinct towards Emily, the innocent child caught in this elaborate deception. She knew she had to face Eleanor, not just for herself, but for Emily, for the truth that deserved to be fully unearthed. This time, Sarah didn't linger in the shadows. She walked directly to Eleanor's apartment building, her resolve a steel casing around her trembling heart. She pressed the buzzer for Unit 3B, the number etched into her memory from Daniel's journal. A hesitant voice answered through the intercom. "Hello, Eleanor," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "My name is Sarah Miller. I was Daniel's wife." There was a stunned silence, then a sharp, indrawn breath. I don't know what you're talking about," Eleanor stammered, her voice thin, laced with panic. "Oh, I think you do," Sarah replied, a touch of steel entering her tone. "I found Daniel's journal. I know about you, and I know about Emily, and I know about the blackmail." Another beat of silence, heavier this time. Then, a click, and the faint whir of the door unlocking. Sarah pushed through, her heart pounding, and rode the elevator up, each floor a step closer to the inevitable confrontation. Eleanor was waiting for her, standing just inside her apartment door, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and defiance. The gentle demeanor Sarah had observed before was gone, replaced by a tense, wary stance. The apartment itself was tastefully decorated, betraying no sign of the turmoil that had defined its inhabitants' life. Then, from a hallway, a soft voice called out, "Mommy, can I have a snack?" "Emily." The sound of the child's voice hung in the air, a stark reminder of the innocent life intertwined with such dark secrets. Eleanor flinched, glancing nervously towards the hallway. "Come in," she said, her voice barely audible, ushering Sarah into the living room. "Let's talk where she can't hear us." The conversation that followed was brutal, a raw unveiling of two parallel lives colliding. Eleanor, initially defensive, slowly crumbled under the weight of Sarah's accusations, especially when Sarah mentioned the specific details Richard had provided about the blackmail. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face as she confessed, not of love, but of desperation. She had been struggling financially, alone and vulnerable after moving to the city. Daniel, a kind and seemingly affluent married man, had presented an opportunity she couldn't resist. She admitted to the initial seduction, then the calculated pregnancy, seeing it as her only path to security. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," Eleanor choked out, wiping her eyes. "But I was so scared. And he had so much. He promised he'd leave you, he really did. But he never did. He just gave me money to keep me quiet, to keep up appearances for Emily. He loved her, he really did. But he couldn't choose. And I was desperate. I just wanted a life for my daughter." Sarah listened, a strange sense of empathy beginning to mingle with her lingering anger. This wasn't a simple story of good and evil, but of flawed people making desperate choices. Eleanor's tears seemed genuine, her desperation palpable. The picture Richard had painted, while accurate in its ruthlessness, lacked the nuance of human frailty. "He was trying to get away from you," Sarah stated, her voice flat. "He was stashing money, planning to take Emily and leave you behind. He was terrified of you." Eleanor flinched, her eyes widening in genuine shock. No, that's not true. He would never." He said he was saving for Emily's future, for our future. He always said he'd find a way. The raw disbelief on Eleanor's face was unmistakable. This was a truth she hadn't known, a layer of Daniel's deception even she was unaware of. The realization hung between them. Daniel had played both of them, meticulously crafting separate realities, making promises he never intended to keep to either. The weight of Daniel's intricate web of lies, the sheer emotional and financial toll it had taken on everyone involved, was staggering. His death, once a mystery, now seemed like an inevitable consequence of the unbearable stress he had inflicted upon himself. He had been a man caught between two worlds, unable to choose, ultimately consumed by his own deceit. Sarah decided on a course of action. She wouldn't expose Eleanor publicly, wouldn't destroy Emily's life. The child was innocent, and that was paramount. But Eleanor would have to face the consequences of her actions. Sarah, with the help of a lawyer, discreetly began the process of severing Daniel's financial ties to Eleanor, ensuring Emily's well-being was secured through a trust fund established under strict legal oversight, separate from Eleanor's control. It was a complex and emotionally draining process, but Sarah felt a grim satisfaction in dismantling the last remnants of Daniel's hidden life. In the end, Sarah found a painful kind of peace. Her marriage to Daniel was forever tainted, but she had confronted the truth, no matter how ugly. She had seen the full, tragic scope of his choices and their devastating impact. Emily, the child born of deceit, remained an innocent, and Sarah felt a quiet, unexpected resolve to ensure her future was free from the shadows of her father's past. Sarah often returned to Daniel's journal, no longer for answers, but for reflection. It was a testament to the fragile line between truth and deception, a chilling reminder that even those closest to us can harbor unimaginable secrets. Her life, once predictable and safe, was irrevocably changed, but through the crucible of betrayal and revelation, Sarah had emerged stronger, wiser, and with a newfound understanding of the complexities of the human heart. And as for you, if this story has resonated with you, if it's made you think about the secrets we keep and the lives we lead, please like this video to show your support. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that delve into the depths of human mystery and emotion. And hit that notification bell so you never miss another profound journey into the untold stories of everyday lives. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of a truth hidden for far too long.